record on this computer. There we go. So welcome. This is, I'm not sure which number 7 maybe, in the series I've been doing about if you could only take one more trip, where should you go? And obviously, you know, with...
You're frozen, Sheila.
I'm frozen? Is it okay?
Well,
now?
You're okay now. Yeah.
Okay. With COVID, we're kind of stuck to dreaming right now and travel tomorrow. Dream today, travel tomorrow. A lot of the river cruise companies are still suspended. There is some European cruises that are going right now, so they are starting, but we're not quite there yet, but hopefully not too far in the future. How many of you folks have taken a river cruise before? Anyone? No? Oh, awesome. Okay. Oh, Leon, you have?
Yes, we did. Nancy's brother and sister-in-law from Calgary organized one that they invited us to join them on.
Oh, wonderful. And where did you sail?
Did the Mekong?
Oh,
Vietnam and
Cambodia.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. You had mentioned that to me before. Because I think we've worked together on a couple of land trips for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else here done a river cruise yet? Okay, so we'll get started. I'll kind of jump in to give an introduction about the main differences between river cruise and ocean cruise. I'm the one presenting today since it's Canada Day here, Neil. Tomorrow it's a national holiday. So we're just going to talk in general. I've had a number of travel partners on these Tuesday travel calls. This week, I'll just go through a beginner's guide that I've created. Kind of sets out the differences between a river cruise and an ocean cruise, the things you should consider when you're selecting a river cruise, and then after you've actually booked it, the other things that you should do to make sure everything goes well. One of the things I should update you on is that I have had some trainings, obviously, and up-to-date status reports from my various river cruise partners. We do think that river cruising will come back faster than ocean cruising, although small ship ocean cruising will come back faster than the mega ships on the ocean. But river cruising by its very nature, and one of the things that I will talk about as we go through, is that river cruising is already a very intimate experience. The largest river cruise ship has 190 people. So that's a very different experience than ocean cruising that can have 3,000 up to 6,000 plus. It becomes at that point a moving mall almost, you know, in terms of trying to get on and off the ship and move around. So one of my river cruise partners at Ama Waterways was saying that river cruising did social distancing before social distancing was cool. So we'll actually see how that transpires. And once the North American clientele starts traveling, because we can't travel right now, but how it actually comes into play. Obviously, they're doing a lot of studies and research to make sure that it's as safe as possible. But the biggest thing to think about as you're planning your travel going forward is that ocean cruising, they have to follow the dictates, they don't have to follow the dictates of the individual countries, because once they are in international waters, they don't have to follow the rules of that country. Whereas a river cruise, because they're so small and they're intimate, they really have to follow each country's individual rules, which means if Germany has health and safety rules that they're creating, they have to follow those. Then when they go into Austria, they have to follow those. So it's really a higher standard, especially than if they're North American company or an Australian company, they would have to follow their own guiding country's rules as well. So there's a lot of things that will come into play, and we don't have all the answers yet as to how that will actually translate, but it is going to be the area that comes back first. Okay, let me go to my slides and we'll share.
bridge. No.
Okay, can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so River Cruising 101 or a beginner's guide to river cruise. So this is a PDF I've created, or an ebook, if you will. I'll step through the introductory stuff because it describes who I am, and a lot of you folks, we've worked together before, but I'll just give a basic overview of who I am and how I work, and then we'll jump into the major differences. So this is a river cruise guide I've created, step-by-step guide. I'm independent. This is an example of an Amazon river cruise I've done with international expeditions. I specialize in bucket list and adventure travel, and certainly river cruise experiences are something that I really love to plan for my clients. So today we'll talk about River Cruise 101. We'll talk about the 10 similarities between river and ocean, the 3 biggest differences, the 8 things you need to decide before you select a river over an ocean, the 7 steps you need to take during, and the 6 things you have to do after. So it's just a way of stepping through it to give you some things to think about. So I always say swap your fly and flop for stop and stop. I don't work in beach holidays. That's not where I emphasize the value I can give to clients. I instead look at stop and stop, where you're going to a destination and immersing yourself in the destination to learn about it. And you are the bread and the destination is the sauce. So stop and stop typically is an adventure holiday with a physical element, a cultural element, and an element of nature. And it's experiential and authentic. So these are the kind of things I like to focus on: Fogo Island Inn, Galapagos, so more adventure, something different, going to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, maybe visiting Colombia, Alaska, the Taj Mahal in India. So I do these kind of holidays rather than an all-inclusive vacation getaway to Cuba. Those are something that people can do very easily on their own. And I like to provide some value for the clients and also have some fun. That's the kind of stuff I like to do. These are some pictures of a Peruvian Amazon trip I did with my husband and my daughter. These are the kind of things you can do. He actually caught that piranha with a very simple pole, and the crew on board the ship fried it up, and we had it for dinner. So just a type of experiences you can have. So the world is vast, go explore. And I say you can't buy happiness, but you can buy a plane ticket. Please God, again soon. At least we can buy them. We might not be able to go very far right now. But anyway, we're getting there. And that's where I come in. That's the kind of things I do as a travel advisor. Reduce your risk and stress, add value and convenience, and transform the whole experience from good to great. So personalized planning, peace of mind, advice and accountability. And I used to be an actuary. I prepared people for premature death. So it was not a lot of focus on enjoying life. It was really preparing for your death. And now as a travel advisor, I help them make sure that they're maximizing their return on life. I'm Lush Life. I'm part of Vision Direct Travel, which is Canada's largest travel agency. Together, we're part of Virtuoso. Vision and Direct in Canada, over $900 million in business for 2019, part of Direct Travel, which is the largest combination. So we have strength and stability as an organization, and we're part of Virtuoso, doing over $15 billion a year. Value for money, global expertise, access and accountability. We'll flip through this quickly. As you guys know, if I've planned travel for you, I go through a whole process. I work with the best of the best, but I also work with 4- and 5-star. It's all about value for money and making sure, I guess I was describing it to someone yesterday as a matchmaker. You know the old Fiddler on the Roof song, matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. That's kind of what I do for my clients. I get to know them and how they like to travel, because there's a whole bunch of companies I work with. So it's figuring out which one is right for you. Global expertise and connections. I just got off the phone with Lisa Bain of Lindblad. That's a presentation we did about Iceland, and I'm going to do a group with her to Iceland. Galapagos is coming up. So just an example of some of the companies. So I represent you. I'm part of Vision Together, part of Virtuoso. So when you deal with me, it's not just me, it's having all these large corporate structures behind. And that gives us some special access.
Go ahead, Mac, no.
Oh, your dog acting up? Okay, these are some trips I did. That's okay. Some trips I did with clients this past year. Obviously 2020, we got to reconfigure and we'll get going again in 2021. Accountability, different reviews clients have done of me, their validated client reviews. And the VIP treatment, transform the whole experience from good to great. Again, this is a picture of my husband on an Amazon river cruise. If you are looking to do something different, a cruise to the Amazon is probably the most relaxing experience I've ever had. No internet, no TV, no newspapers, just nature, and you're forced to relax. Does that sound like a good vacation to people, or does that, no? Is that your idea of fun? Okay, so it's just Virtuoso amenities, different things we get by booking through Virtuoso, special things, and let's just skip over. This is an example of a client I traveled with to the Amazon. Okay, and then we'll jump into today's. Any questions before we get started? Let me just make sure we've had no one else join us, because the way I'm doing it, it's not going to give me. No, I think we're good. Okay. 10 similarities between river and ocean. Okay, who's done an ocean cruise? Most of you guys have done ocean? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So the biggest difference you're going to see with a river and ocean is that, or the biggest commonalities between a river and ocean, they're all going to be a moving hotel room. You're going to settle into your stateroom, unpack once. You visit a variety of destinations. You have planned activities. You have safety briefings. You pay for all or most of your food and entertainment on board, similar amenities, private baths, storage, access to internet and Wi-Fi, access to onboard activities, libraries, lectures, and access to some sort of fitness facilities. So if you've done an ocean cruise, you have all of that on a river cruise on a totally different scale, of course. Remember, if you're talking about 6,000 people versus 150 people, it becomes totally different. The biggest differences between river and ocean is obviously one's on a river, one's on the ocean. While that is obvious, if you think about the history of maritime life in Europe, all of the work was done on the rivers, and that was the main source of commerce. So that's why if you're doing a European river cruise, you're really going to see a lot of history, a lot of architecture, and you're going to go through the center of town. So docking and location is going to be a big difference too between river and ocean. Again, ocean, if you take an ocean cruise to Rome, you will be, an hour and a half outside of Rome. You got to get on a bus and travel down. With a river cruise, you are in the heart of where you're going. So you're right in the center. If you're getting off the river cruise ship in Vienna, you walk off the boat quite easily and you're in Vienna. Depending where you're located, you might actually have to hop a subway or take a motor coach. That's going to get you around Vienna because Vienna is quite large. But you're there, you're in the heart, you can explore on your own. You don't need transfers to go around unless you want to see something in specific. So river cruise takes you where you want to be, generally very walkable, or you can tour cities by bike. Oh, someone's just joined, let me admit her. Welcome, Louise. River cruising, access to sites gives you the opportunity to see and do. Ocean cruises tend to be bigger ports. I love ocean cruising too. I don't mean to sound down on ocean cruising. It's just the nature of the size. The very different products that they are represented by the size of the vehicles that you're traveling in. And because of the size of ocean ships, you know, whether it's a smaller ship that has 700 or it's one of these ships that have 6,000 people, it's going to take you a long time to get on and off. And it's going to have safety rules that are very different than you would have on a river cruise if you only have 150 people. Okay, ports you visit. If you're on a river cruise, you are going to see places you're not going to see on an ocean cruise. If you are on a river cruise, you are going to be able to visit Amsterdam, Vienna, Budapest. You cannot see those on an ocean cruise. There's one cruise, I think Viking does an ocean and a river that kind of does a combination in and out of Amsterdam, but really that's it. The rest are all river cruises. You have Vienna, Paris, Honfleur, Lyon, very small cities in terms of where they are and they're located on the river, but very accessible when you are traveling on a river cruise ship. And then of course you have, it's not just Europe. I mentioned the Amazon already, but we also have the Nile, the Mekong, Vietnam. You can do the Chobe River in Africa as well. So you can see a lot of places, but you're not going to be able to visit the Galapagos or Antarctica on a river cruise. The ship that's in the picture with me is an ocean cruise, expedition cruise. It obviously, this is one I did a circumnavigation of Newfoundland, and when we went over to Nova Scotia, that's going to be an ocean cruise. So the things to decide, those are the main differences between river and ocean, as you might have gathered. But the biggest things to think about when you're looking at doing a river cruise, you know, we mentioned the fact the size. River cruising has really taken off already for 2021. The numbers are already 35% higher for 2021 than they were in 2019. So that's before pandemic. And then you have everybody in 2020 who was sailing, who's had to be resituated. Most people have rebooked. So you have companies like AMA Waterways who are already 70% sold out for 2021. And here we are in the middle of a global pandemic. So river cruising is going to come back first. So if it's something you're thinking about, think about that, because we're already dealing with a product that's quite small. If you think of a typical river cruise ship has 150 people, that's why you're not really going to see huge sales. I think a lot of people think that, oh, we'll just hang around, there's going to be huge sales coming. And there may be for ocean, because ocean's going to have a totally different set of situations and worries to deal with. But river cruising are already going to be quite small, and they're selling already for next year. So I don't think you're going to see major big sales like you might see in ocean cruises. Okay, let's look at the 8 things to decide before you pick which river cruise, or before you pick river or ocean. Is seasickness a concern? Do you want to be on land every day, or are sea days a joy to you? And I have some clients that are ocean going clients and they just love being at sea all day. When would you like to cruise? Where would you like to cruise? Is the ship or the destination more important to you? How important are the choices? How many people and who do you want to travel with? And how important is it to fix costs up front? Anyone here subject to seasickness? No? I know some people who are reluctant to try cruising. They're a little nervous about seasickness. For anybody who's never cruised, a river cruise is often the fantastic way to go, because there are no waves, you're on a river. So it's kind of like for people in Ottawa going up and down the going up and down Dow's Lake and the Ottawa Canal. You know, unless you're doing something in Russia where there might be lakes with more waves. Generally speaking, river cruising, especially in Europe on the rivers, seasickness is not going to be a problem. You're always going to see land, for one thing, and there are no waves, there's no tidal motion. They also go much slower. You don't really have the impact of the speeds that you have with ocean-going cruises. So it's generally very smooth, and you don't have that up and down wave action. Also on ocean, you will not see land very often. And as I say, my clients that love ocean cruising, they love the calmness and serenity of being out and having an ocean day and seeing no land around them. That's often when they'll read their books and they'll relax and they'll take in the ship. Because oftentimes the ship, an ocean-going ship, the ship is part of the vacation. A lot of people choose an ocean-going cruise because of the ship. So that becomes more important than the destination sometimes. Whereas river cruising, it's going to be about where you're going to visit. Do you want to be on land every day, or do you enjoy sea days like we just mentioned? River cruise ships are going to go from port to port very quickly. I think the largest, I was talking to a colleague the other day that this river cruise, Lower Danube, that's going to go into Eastern Europe, is probably the longest river cruise, and it covers something like 1,200 kilometers. That is the longest river cruise, whereas an ocean cruise will cover that and more. The river cruise ports tend to be very close together, so you're going to get on and off the ship every day. You'll see things as you're sailing, depending which itinerary you're choosing. You'll see the shoreline, you'll sail past vineyards, you'll see castles. So it's very scenic and interactive. You see the birds. Depending on some sailings, you might actually see people out barbecuing, and you could smell what they're barbecuing. You'll wave to people driving past in their cars. It's very different than ocean cruising, where you could be sailing for 12 hours, 36 hours and not see any land. So it's a very different experience. When will you cruise will often decide if a river cruise is right for you too. Unless you're doing the Amazon or Africa, European river cruising tends to be March to October, November, and then Christmas markets picking up as for the late November, early December. Generally speaking, that's when European river cruising goes. So when you're looking at an ocean cruise, if you wanted to do Alaska, for example, Alaska is only going to be March to September, October. Now this year there are no Alaska cruises, so that's, but it just gives you a sense of the seasonality and how different cruises will go with the season. If you're doing a Caribbean, it's going to be January, February, March, generally speaking. So when you cruise, like if you can only go in January, you're not going to do a European river cruise. So that's going to dictate what you're choosing. And where would you like to visit? We've mentioned the Rhine, the Danube, the Seine, the Douro, the Volga in Russia. If you want to do the Amazon, Peru. So ocean cruises are going to visit like the Panama Canal, Alaska, Galapagos, as we mentioned. So you can't do those on a river. So where you want to visit is going to determine whether river or ocean. And is the ship or the destination more important? This is a picture of us in Vienna, going to visit Schönbrunn Palace. If the destination is important, odds are that a river cruise is going to be something that would appeal to you more, just because you're going to have more time in port. It's not to say you won't get a good experience on an ocean cruise or that you won't experience a destination. But if you're in Rome, for example, and you have that one day in Rome, you're going to have to get on a bus an hour and a half to go down, and then an hour and a half to come back, and you have to probably be on the ship again to start sailing at 6 o'clock. You don't have a lot of time in Rome. Whereas if you're on a river cruise, most of the river cruise ships will at least spend a night or 2 nights in Vienna to give you a sense of the city. There's so much to see and do. So it's more of an immersion in the destination. The ship will have lots of interesting things for you to learn and see, but the ship is not the main purpose of the trip. Whereas if you're in Rome and you're just getting a taster visit, when you get back on the ship, you want to be engaged and learn more and prepare for the next day. So it's a totally different experience that way. The cruise ships are often like large floating cities. We mentioned that. This is a cruise I did with my family to Alaska. You can see the multiple tiers. And as you can imagine, getting on and off the ship, those of you, many of you have done ocean cruises, you know that. It can take a while to get back and forth. Ocean ships will often have 12 decks. Just think about a river cruise. River cruise ships generally have 4 decks. So you generally have a lower deck where you'll have your cabins that don't have windows that open, that may have a high window. Any of you have a basement? You have windows in your basement in your house? That's kind of like what a river cruise high water window, or it's called the swan view window, is like. You have to stand up to look out. And when you lie down, your head is underneath water. So that's generally deck 1, and there'll be a restaurant there. Deck 2 will be all, generally have a lounge and more passenger rooms, cabins. Deck 3 will then probably have a bistro or coffee area and more the suites and bigger cabins. And then deck 4 would be like the common area where it might be a sitting area in the sun or deck chairs and those kind of things. River cruise ships all have to be the same size. And we'll mention that again in a bit, but you have to think about if you're doing a river cruise through Europe, all the ships have to be the same size because they all have to go around the same bends in the river. They all have to go under the same bridges. And this top deck on a river cruise, deck 4, it will collapse often. So if it has a structure that will allow you to sit under it to get some sun or give you some shade, if you're going under a low slung bridge, that structure has to collapse. So it's a very different experience than a very large 12 deck structure like this ocean cruise. How important are choices? Well, with a river cruise, you often, it has a bit of a sticker shock when people are thinking about the price of a river cruise sometimes, if you've not done it before, because the pricing tends to be all-inclusive or pretty much all-inclusive. It will generally have beer and wine included, at least for lunch and dinner. Depending on the river cruise company, it'll have everything included. Ocean cruises are going to have more choices. It'll have more dining venues for you to select from. It'll have more activities. It'll also present more areas for quiet space, more entertainment. You know, you might have a big Broadway show on board an ocean. You would not have that on a river. On a river, you would tend to have, you might have some musicians. If you're in Budapest or in Vienna, they would bring in some local musicians. They would also bring in some local chefs. So there's that sense of interacting with the people where you are, but it's also very authentic and very small scale. You're not going to have, illuminations or those folks, a scaled down Broadway show like you might on a ocean cruise. Ocean cruises tend to have gyms, pools, saunas, spas, saloons, casinos, salons, I meant, casinos, all of this entertainment to keep you entertained when you're not going ashore and to keep you engaged and also to get you to spend money, of course. River cruising doesn't do that. I mean, you may have a guest lecture depending on the ship. You may have a very small exercise room, with a couple of bikes. There will be some bikes for you to go when you're ashore to rent or to borrow, depending on the cruise ship and what's included. But it's not going to have, for those that are dedicated to lifting weights, it's not going to be something that would satisfy someone who's really into that. There would be some basic things there, but not very extensive. How important are choices? Again, we mentioned the ocean cruises are going to have 24-hour buffets, might have 5 or 6 different restaurants you can go to. Generally speaking, on a river cruise, well, I have here buffet breakfast and lunch, and longer 4 to 5 course dinners. One of the things with moving to dealing with the pandemic, of course, while everything is in a state of flux and they're developing plans, one of the things they're going to do is not have any self-serve buffets. That's already all the major lines have said they're doing away with that. Now, they may have someone who's coming and serving you, but there's a way of controlling what used to be a buffet breakfast. They're not going to be doing that anymore. But river cruising tends to have a fixed time. You know, breakfast will be, say, 7 to 9, lunch 12 to 2, something like that, and dinner 7 to 9. Ocean cruising, you know, you generally have an early dining and a late dining. You might have some choice if you want dine around or whatever your cruise line calls it. There are different names for the same thing. But essentially, ocean cruising gives you a lot of choice. River cruising, not so much. All the choice has kind of gone into choosing the product you did up front. How many people and who do you want to travel with? Okay, we already said the largest river cruise has 190 people. Ocean cruises will have 3,000, some 6,000. Smaller ocean cruises, 700. Very small ocean cruises, 400, but the vast majority are, you know, 750 plus. 3,000 is probably a standard size for an ocean cruise. The largest river cruise is 190, and that's Viking. Generally speaking, it's about 150 average. If you're doing a specialty one, like in the Mekong, be much smaller. How many people did you have, Leon and Nancy?
It's about 120, I think.
120, yeah. So if you're doing something specialized like that, you would have a smaller number, even than you know, the typical river cruise. And that's something too, just to give you a sense, the regular river cruise ship is about the size of a football field and has 150 people on it, okay, average. An ocean-going cruise is going to have 750 people on each football field size, but they tend to be 4 football fields large. So if you think of 3,000 people on 4 times versus 150 people on 1 football field, just to give you a sense of size and construct. River cruises tend to be, they self-select, you know, people tend to be a little bit older, a little bit well-traveled, interest in history, music, archaeology, where'd that come from? Architecture, I meant to say. Archaeology would be more expedition cruising, unless you're doing the Egypt, I guess, or the Nile. But they do tend to be well-traveled foodies, people who have an interest in wine. It tends to be a very different demographic than, say, your family ocean cruise on Carnival. Now, ocean cruising is very large, and you can choose the ocean cruise that you want to go with, certainly. We could slice and dice all the different ocean cruises. You know, Carnival's a very different product than Regent. You're going to get totally different demographics of family, budget-oriented on a Carnival versus Regent, again, your luxury client looking for all included and a higher level of food and service. But that is, you know, that's going to be the continuum for ocean cruising, whereas river cruising is already a much smaller field. And whoops, my internet's cutting out. Can you guys see me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Where'd my PowerPoint go? Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, you can? Okay, let me just see if I can get it back here. I'll stop sharing for a second. And we'll share it again. So it should be back. Can you see okay? Okay, my internet glitched. Can everybody see okay? The slides? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, good. I wasn't sure if it still was glitching. So ocean cruises are much larger, river cruises fewer guests. River cruises tend, unless again, ocean cruising, you get someone like Oceania, Regent, they're gonna be high level food, you know, foodie experiences, cooking classes on board. That's very rare on ocean cruising. River cruising, it's much more common. It's much more standard fare for how they operate. River cruising tends to be only 2 passengers a cabin. There are some lines that are solo friendly, but it tends to be 2, very rarely 3 people, sometimes 4, very rarely connect. Whereas ocean cruising, you'll have triple and quad rooms. You might have connecting rooms for a family. River cruising tends to get more international clients because of the European nature. You know, depending on the brand of ocean and how they're marketing, they might get a lot more North Americans if they're positioning a particular sailing, Caribbean, especially January, it's going to be North Americans on board. Whereas river cruising, you tend to have an international mix, and you may have, while the big brands do market to the English-speaking market predominantly, there would be French-speaking markets, cruise lines as well. But generally on board a river cruise, you could have a good mix of Canadians, Americans, Australians, New Zealand folk, and Europeans all on board. So it tends to be a very different mix than ocean cruises. They don't have the sales pitch. There's no forced socializing like with ocean cruising. You tend to have dinner tables that could be 4, 6, 8, or 12. River tends to be smaller. It's more friendly for solos. You can go and sit with one person one night and go sit at a different table the next night. It's much more free that way. Fixed costs up front. I mentioned that river cruising sometimes catches people by surprise with a sticker shock. And what you have to think of is that river cruising includes a lot more up front. So generally speaking, beer and wine at lunch and dinner, as I mentioned, a shore excursion in every port. And depending on the cruise, then some of the differences will be whether they include tips, whether they include transfers. That's going to separate out the different layers or different lines, classes of brands. So we have, you know, your premium, what are the big luxury, premium, and contemporary. So contemporary brands would be more like Emerald Waterways or Viking. Premium would be more like Avalon and Ama Waterways, and the luxury brands would be Uniworld, Scenic, Crystal, and Tauck. And the major differences between those 3 levels is how much they include. Because remember, we mentioned the size, the box is the box, they're all the same size. So really what differentiates the companies then is what they do on board the ship and how they separate out the box, how they decorate the box, and what they include, and the number of people on board. Okay, river cruises tend to include shore excursions. If you do an ocean cruise, whether you've done Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Oceania, you're paying for your shore excursions. River cruises tend to include that. Ocean cruises will charge add-ons for the beverages and the Wi-Fi. River cruises appear to be higher priced, but they include more up front. So things to remember, weather issues. River cruises do have low water, high water things that have to be considered. You know, we've had some historical floods that there used to be once 1 in 100 years, 1 in 500 years. You know, there's ups and downs on the weather and changes in climate. So all we can do is prepare for it as best we can, but the water levels rising and falling are going to affect the river cruise levels and whether or not the ship can operate safely. Then it sometimes comes down to choosing a company that has a low draft so it can maximize the chance that your sailing is going to be going ahead as planned, or some other lines that do have a lot of ships. Sometimes they will sail so far, and if they get stuck, They say, okay, we're going to pack up and we're going to put you on the sister ship. You're going to go do your shore excursion and we'll put you on the sister ship to continue down, and those folks will switch over. So there are different ways to handle the weather issues. People sometimes get surprised by that with river cruising, but it is an issue with ocean cruising too. If you've done ocean cruising, you know, if there's a storm or a hurricane, that can impact an ocean cruise. And obviously the guest safety is always going to be paramount, and they will try to make sure that they keep guests safe no matter what. So what seems to fit you better? Generally speaking, river cruising, you know, you might want to mingle, you want everything on the ship to be within a minute's walk. You can be heavy internet users. River cruising, internet's included. Not always working, but it's included. And what you have to think about is that if you're going through a port, if you're going through a lock, those of you in Ottawa know how locks operate quite well, but the European rivers are all full of locks. So anytime you're going through a lock, you will often lose internet. And so while it's in operation, it's free, but it's not always in operation, or you might lose it. On ocean cruising, you can pay a bomb for internet access, of course. It used to be that was not a big thing that people worried about, but these days it's a very important thing when you're choosing your holidays. So river cruising is more into history and seeing things. You may have tried ocean cruises already. You don't want to sail with a lot of people. You don't like leaving your luggage in the hallway late at night, like you might on an ocean. Travel solo is often more friendly for a river cruise. Don't want to pay for beer and wine or shore excursions. You already tend to be seasoned travelers. River cruising is not really a family product. There are some brands like Tauk, or Uniworld does a generation. Tauk does bridges, but otherwise river cruising is really an adult product. And even companies like Viking have said 18 and above. So it's not a family-friendly product unless we get into those specialized brands like Tauk Bridges or Uniworld Generations. Generally speaking, you have to plan river cruises farther in advance because, you know, it's 150 people on board, it's going to sell out. If you have problems with motion sickness or you love the all-inclusive aspect, this left-hand side says maybe river cruising's for you. Whereas the ocean cruising, combination of personalities, sea days that we mentioned, dining options, history in small doses perhaps, sleek experiences on board the ship, whether it's fine cuisine or sometimes the boutique shopping. A lot of people really enjoy that. The Broadway shows, that's very different and is something that's very popular on board ocean that is totally missing on the river. Tenders, everybody know what a tender is, right? You have a big ship is going into a smaller port. You have to get on a different vehicle to get a smaller ship to get in to tender to port. A lot of choice. I put the umbrella drinks. You know, I mean, they exist on a river cruise, but it's not, people tend to stick more to beer and wine, mixed drinks. It's not really the shishi umbrella drinks situation. There's no gambling really on river cruising. They don't have the space to have a casino. There's not really room service. There's one brand, I think Crystal just started doing room service, but otherwise it's not something that's popular on river cruise. There's no extreme sports, no rock climbing walls or anything like that on a river cruise. Okay, in very broad strokes, you know, if you think about small town, that's river, and Vegas could be ocean. I mean, again, I don't want to be too broad with the brush that ocean cruising can be anything, given the different kinds of brands that are out there. But generally speaking, river cruising is going to be much more smaller and intimate, more of an Anguilla, very small island type feel. Whereas if you want to draw a comparison to a place you might visit, Vegas might be the comparison for ocean cruising. So it tends to be a lot more choice, but a lot more frenetic, bigger crowds. Oh, my picture kind of, that's a Vegas nightclub. It didn't come out. So it's just talking about the differences again, you know, small and unique, foodie paradise, no crowds. Biggest hotel room has 90 rooms. That's Anguilla, right, in the Caribbean, off the coast of St. Martin, whereas just an 8-kilometer ride across the Caribbean from Anguilla is St. Martin, which is totally different, right? French and Dutch and all the diamond stores you could hope for and all the huge cruise ships go. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's what's right for you and what's right for a particular vacation you're looking for. But river cruising does tend to give you that experience and that choice that is more intimate and authentic. Just to give you a size comparison, Amma and Regent. Now, Regent is a luxury ocean. Amma is more, what do I call it, premium, I guess. Right. Amma and Avalon are, Viking is a more mass market line in terms of they put more people on board the ship and they strip away a lot of the extras to kind of keep the price as friendly as possible to as maximum a number of people. Whereas Tauk and Crystal and Scenic will have a higher price point, but they will have more things included, and they tend to have fewer people on board. So it just gives you that different experience. Amma's kind of entryway to luxury. Amma and Avalon, I would say I would rate in terms of stars, maybe Viking 4-star, Amma 4.5, and Uniworld Tauk 5, and Crystal. So they're all very close. They're already very good products between them. But as you can see, just grabbing some floor space between them, your typical river cruise cabin is going to be much smaller than an ocean-going cabin already. And while the beer and wine is going to be close, the differences between the dining is going to be noted there. Internet included, no in-room dining really, shore excursions included. And here's the staff to guest ratio, right? So with a river cruise, you're essentially going to have 1 for every 3 guests. Okay, so we've talked in broad strokes about river cruising. Here are some of the different river cruise companies that are out there. Arosa, which is a more European brand, Viking, Avalon, Emerald, Amma, Scenic, A&K, Uniworld, Tauk, Crystal, and then specialty companies like International Expeditions and Aqua Expeditions. If we think of the box being the box, right? All the ships have to be the same length and the same width because they all have to go around the same curves in Europe and go under the same bridges. What differentiates all these companies, if they're all giving at least a 4-star experience, they're all including at least beer and wine with lunch and dinner and a shore excursion in each port, then the difference is how many people they put on board. That's going to be the major difference. And the things they include, whether it's all your booze all the time, all your tips, all your transfers. But the biggest difference is going to be how many people are on board. Okay, everybody knows Viking. Viking has done, everybody here has heard of Viking, right? Anyone sailed on Viking? No? That's right. No, you guys, who did you do the Mekong with? Was it?
Amma Waterways.
Amma, okay, awesome. Viking's a great product. They're very good for what they do. They're a very value-oriented company, and they have raised the profile of river cruising because they partnered with Masterpiece Theater and Downton Abbey. You guys watched Downton Abbey when it was on?
Yeah.
I was a big fan. So anytime you watch Downton Abbey or anything on Masterpiece Theater, you'd see these fantastic Viking ads, right? They just were magnificent. And they really appealed to the people who are watching the show. It was a stroke of genius on their part. They spent a bomb on advertising, but as a result, they really raised the profile of river cruising. They control 50% of the river cruise market. They're well known. But they are not the only game in town. They are not the best company in town. It all comes down to what's best for you. But because of Viking having this control of the market or this presence in the market, a lot of people know who they are, which is great because you already start the conversation knowing who they are. but then you might exclude companies like AMA or Uniworld. You might not even think of them because you've only seen the advertising for Viking. And just to give you a sense, Viking, as I mentioned, they did all this advertising with Masterpiece Theater. Then you have a company like Tauk that you might not have even heard of. Tauk has been around for 90 plus years now, a North American company. They have won Best River Cruise. Now every company has won Best River Cruise, depending, one of my colleagues was saying, don't believe the marketing slogans. Each one of them will tell you they won this award from these guys or that award from this guy. They're all great products, just say that up front. But what differentiates them then is the number of people on board and the quality of the things, the experiences you're getting. So if Viking is appealing to put more people on board and bring the price down, then your cabins are going to be smaller and they take away the extra inclusions. That's where I started to go with this, is that Viking did a great job with the advertising. Company like Tauk that you might never have heard of, they don't do any advertising. So totally different approach. They get people on board and they believe that if they do a fantastic job, they convert a client one at a time and they bring them back. So they don't do advertising at all. Totally different model than Viking. What each of them does works for them. But it just means that if, like, you were coming to me, okay, I want to do an ocean cruise on the or river cruise on the Danube. This is what I want, XYZ. Then when we're looking at the different companies, you might not even consider Tauk because you've never heard of them. So that's where, asking more questions or me getting to know you is important. So Viking strips away the bells and whistles. They only do beer and wine at lunch and dinner. No, so if you have a cocktail after supper, or if you like a rum and coke, you would pay for that. They have one tour director on board for 190 people. They don't have bikes on board. They don't have a salon. They've stripped away the bells and whistles. So they're trying to make their product as friendly and appeal to as many people as possible. So here's something to think about. When I say Viking is more mass market, you'll understand what I mean. If you think of a river cruise ship has to be that football field size, Viking has a staff of generally 60 people with 190 people on board, passengers, right? So that's 250 people on board. Whereas you go to someone like Crystal, they tend to have, and Crystal's a luxury product, they'll have 106 guests with 58 staff for 164 people on the same size ship. Now, 164 versus 250 is not that big a deal if you've been traveling with 3,000 or 6,000 on an ocean. That doesn't sound like very much. But if you think that Viking has, another 90 people on board than Crystal does on the same size ship, you have to think about how that translates to the size of the cabins. And also in the global pandemic, we have to think about how we're going to be socially distanced and interact with people. All those people go to the lounge. So a river cruise only has one lounge, and that's where everybody congregates. And, if you're having a drink before dinner or after, just think of a lounge with 190 people versus guests with 60 staff versus 106 and that's 60 staff. So that's where the big differences come in. River cruising. Now, how to pick which cruise is right for you. So we've already said the differences between Viking and someone like Crystal or Tauk or Uniworld. River cruising, the average age is coming down all the time, especially companies like AMA really worked on culinary experience and wine themed cruises. The average age used to be 75 plus. Actually, it's coming down to 65 plus. Now it's more like 55 plus on some cruises and 45 plus on some wine themed. Some companies like Avalon are doing active cruises. Uniworld has a new product, the U by Uniworld, that I took a group of 75 on at Christmas time, took a bunch of solo passengers. It's a very different experience. And again, no rock climbing walls, no family oriented product. So very different. It's really about figuring out which hotel style you like, because if you're thinking the differences are how they decorate and how big the ship cabins are. And again, every cabin is going to be smaller than what you're used to on the ocean. How they differentiate themselves is going to be how the decor they use. One of my colleagues said I don't know if I wrote those notes. He was comparing, a Viking. I'll have to send you that after because it was interesting. Did I write it down? No, I'll send it to you after. But it was comparing, a fashion brand or a hotel chain. I typically say, like, think of Emerald and Viking as being more like a Best Western Holiday Inn, maybe leaning towards a Hilton. Something like Amma is going to be Hilton plus a little bit, Hilton plus or higher, maybe a Shangri-La. Whereas you're thinking about a Tauck or a Uniworld, it's going to be more a Four Seasons or a Kempinski, just drawing some big brands to give you a sense. And that style of decor is reflected in the hotel rooms or your stateroom. They're all going to be appealing to English market, as we mentioned. Yeah, but I'll send you what my colleague said, because he even did it with car lines, a Rolls-Royce versus, a BMW versus something else. So that was interesting. So which product is right for you? If you've made the decision, yes, I want to do a river cruise rather than ocean, how do I know which one to pick rather than just basing it on price? Well, we talked a lot about the number of people on board and the size. And again, crew of 1 to 3 on a river cruise versus 1 to 6 on an ocean. 83 staterooms on a river versus 1,500 plus on an ocean, give you a size of the difference. So one of the things I do is get to know you to figure out which product is right for you. And it's all about your choices, right? The style of the box, the level of service, number of people on board, whether you want a theme sailing, bells and whistles, open bar, and what type of cabin. So the style of the box, if the box is the box, how you decorate the box is different. So this example here, this is a Uniworld cabin. So you can see Uniworld's idea is you visit a castle during the day, you should stay in a castle at night. And each of their ships are decorated very differently, but they tend to be this very Baroque, ornate style. It's very elaborate, and some might dislike it. I have other clients that absolutely love it. It depends on the style that you're looking for. This is the Maria Cristina. It's very different than, say, this, which is a crystal cabin. You can see the difference in style. Crystal more subdued, more neutral colors, still very elegant furniture, but it's just that they're appealing to a different client. How many people on board? Viking puts 190, Amma 164, Mekong and the Chobe and the Nile. Amma has a new Nile product now. That's going to be very different, lower again, whereas Tauck will have 130 on your typical Danube. So we've already mentioned size of the cabin. River cruising too, if you've not done a river cruise before, you have to be very able-bodied, get on and off the ship. It's not wheelchair friendly. You do have to be able to get on and off the gangplank on your own steam. One of the things for those of you who know river cruising, they tend to raft the ships together. They tie them up together, 2 or 3 across. One of the things that Amma was just telling me on a call yesterday, as they're going forward and figuring out how to handle this post-pandemic, they are not having people cut through their cabins anymore. So when the ships are rafted together, if they're rafted together, you will have to go up and over and across, not actually cut through the ship like they used to do. But river cruising, it's not really meant for people in a wheelchair. There are some lines that actually will make it a little easier. If you're on a scooter, you can get on, but you have to be able to get on and off yourself, whereas ocean cruising will be more wheelchair accessible. Amma, again, you can partner, Amma partners with Backroads as well as Adventure by Disney. They also have a family brand. Amma also has golf courses. If you want to do golfing, especially their new ship, the Amma Magna, you can actually do golfing through Europe. Uniworld partners with Butterfield and Robinson, AMA with Back Roads. Those are adventure companies, so you could do more biking if that interests you. And the family sailing, family themed, we mentioned already. Themed cruises, AMA's really developed a niche with wine themed cruises. Avalon often brings special guests on board. They've had Jan Arden. Uniworld does a Jewish heritage. Uniworld also does watercolor painting. You know, they're all appealing to something different. So depending on your interest, we can find a particular sailing that really appeals. The bells and whistles, okay, we talked about shore excursions. A big difference with transfers. Viking, you'll pay for your transfers. Not big, not huge. Suppose it's $200, whereas somewhere like Tauk or Uniworld, that'll be included. Whether you pay for your tips, again, not big, not huge. Viking, you know, it's not included, but it might be, say, 20 euros per person per day. So you just have to factor that in. If you choose a Viking, there's going to be that additional charge. Whereas someone like Tauk or Uniworld or Scenic, that's included. Most of the river cruise companies put bikes on and some small gyms. Crystal is starting to bring in some extra dining choices. AMA has some chef tables, some cooking classes, wine pairing dinners. Uniworld does that as well. Some, like Crystal, have butlers. They generally all have some form of laundry service, but it really depends on the style you want. And there was one thing I wanted to, yeah, the decor, also the bedding, whether or not the bedding faces the window, that's something that Avalon has really differentiated themselves with. They face the bed to the window so that you can lie in bed as you're sailing and look out. Open bar or not, we mentioned, you know, the premium and the contemporary don't include everything. The luxury brands do. Again, it's something you pay for. This is an example of a high window, which is the lower deck cabins. You can see this is my friend Carlo standing up next to his window. He's about 6 feet tall. So you can see where the window is on him. So you have to stand up to look out. And when you lie down, you're underneath the water. Now, some people could care less. They want the most economical version. This is what's called the entry level or the swan view. And they call it swan view because when you stand up and look out, especially if you're in Vienna, you'll see the swans outside your window. But when you lie down, you're underneath the water. Some people like that. Others can't stand the thought of it. So it's just something important to know. This is a French balcony cabin. This is generally on deck 2 and above, deck 2 or 3. French balcony essentially is like a sliding door to your, if you have a deck, you have a sliding door that goes out to your deck. You can see the steel railing that goes across. So it extends the life of your cabin, makes it bigger, but they have steel railings so you don't fall in. You can't sit outside with a table and chair or anything, but it does give you that extension of your cabin and makes it feel like you have more space. So the style of the box, the level of service, again, you know, Crystal, Tauk, Uniworld, Scenic, they're going to have the highest level of service. They'll have more. And that's something I mentioned about Viking has 1 tour director. Tauk has 5 tour directors for fewer guests. So the tour directors are really the people that come on the buses with you and organize the excursions. They also have restaurant or hotel staff on the back end that manage your experience on board. So all of the differences between the different brands or how many people are there servicing you, and that gives you a different level of experience. And then wrap up after you've chosen your experience. It's whether or not you want a pre-tour before your cabin. If you go to Mekong, depending on the direction you went, you might go to Ho Chi Minh City or Siem Reap and spend a couple of extra days. If you're in Europe, depending on the city, you might go to Vienna for a few nights at the beginning, or maybe Budapest. The river cruise I did with my group of 75, we actually, we're a bit over, wrapping up. We went into Budapest on the front end, and then we ended in Prague. Prague is not on the river, but it, you know, generally you sail into Passau and take a transfer to Munich or to Prague. And we went to Prague for a couple of days at the end. So pre and post stays, whether or not to book air with the cruise liner independently, whether or not the transfers come with the cruise or not, have to review your insurance, passport, entry and exit. And that was the big group I just did. So that's essentially the basis of what I wanted to present to you today. Does anyone have any questions or anything I can help with?
I have a question, because you had mentioned something about booking air with the cruise line. So will they do that for you?
Depending on the cruise line. Let me just make sure I got the share turned off. I think I do. Yep. Depending on the cruise line, they will. You don't always get the same. Some people have points, or they want to book their own air. They want to visit family in London first, and they want to control it. And that's totally fine. You can do that. Other times, for example, I booked a client with Amma to go to the Mekong. He's a very tall gentleman. He likes to ensure that he gets window seats, you know, the extra, he's 6'6". So his location for his seat is very important to him. If we book the air with Amma, we tend to get it maybe 60 days in advance. The pricing might be the same, but it doesn't give him that control to pick his seats. So if something like that is really important to you, it may be best to book it independently of the cruise line. And depending on the offers, there might be air included or not, or discounted air. We can slice and dice it for you to see what's best. If we book it through the air, through the cruise line, or you book it on points, I also have a Vision Air desk that we use to book flights for clients as well.
Okay.
Yes, Kathy.
What about the engine noise?
Engine noise. It's not generally an issue. That's one thing we didn't really talk about was rivers tend to go downstream, right?
Lower cabins.
Yeah. Rivers tend to go downstream. So when you're sailing on your river cruise, you can either choose to go downstream or upstream. So if you're going downstream, you're going to use less motor, right? Less motor noise, but it's going to actually move faster. If you're going upstream, there's going to be more motor noise because you're going against the current, but you'll have a more scenic experience. It'll be slower. Generally speaking, that's one thing, like with scenic or some Viking cruises, they actually put some of their suites above the engine, which means if you're going upstream, you're going to hear a bit more noise. So looking at the cabin and what's important to you is something to look at. But generally, it's not going to be ocean noise like if you're on an ocean. But it is something, if you're sensitive about it, to choose the most midship and away from the ocean, the rivers. Motors.
When I was on my Greek cruise, we were at the back right next to the engine. It was very noisy.
Oh, yeah?
Got used to it after a while, but still it was really noisy.
Yeah. So that's something like the more midship, or knowing where the motors are. And you have to think, if you're going upstream, especially like say you're doing Budapest to Amsterdam, right? You're going to be going upstream till you get to Regensburg. And then you have to go through the Main Canal, the Main-Danube Canal, and you're actually climbing up. And then you're going through like 80 locks, and then you come down, and then you're going to be going downstream for the Rhine. So depending on what you choose, it's going to be that combination of upstream, downstream. And then you pick the cabin, if you're going to be sensitive to it, that's going to take you away from the motors as much as possible.
So they usually cruise when you're asleep?
Pardon me? Do you cruise when you sleep? It depends on where they're going. If you're going through the Wachau Valley in Austria, whoops, sorry. Okay, I don't know who that is and I can't turn it off. If you're going through the Wachau Valley in Austria, You generally, they're going to cruise during the daytime to give you that scenic experience and see as much as possible so you can enjoy it, if you're sailing past vineyards. But if you're going, through a more industrial port, they'll do that at night. So there's a lot of locks that you have to go through, but generally speaking, if it's something beautiful, they're gonna do it during the day so you can enjoy it and take it all in. Whereas if it's some more industrial area or locks that aren't, very large and not exactly scenic, they'll do those at night. It depends. They don't have to travel the distances that ocean cruises have to go, so it doesn't tend to be the same situation that way. But generally, they're going to sail to give you the most scenic experience possible. Any other questions?
What's your refund policy if something's booked and something happens? So if you're booking now for 21,
yeah.
and
the river cruise company, everybody's different, each river cruise, and that's one of the things about being a travel advisor now is having to know all of this, right? Every company is different, but generally speaking, they have been very open to making changes and allowing people to make a change. Certainly 2020 is, they're letting you change up until, but each river cruise company is different. So AMA would have a different policy than Uniworld, than Scenic, than Tauck, but generally they're allowing people to make changes, or they have an insurance policy with them, a deposit protection plan, so that if you change your mind and you don't want to go or you're nervous about it, then they will allow you to move the funds to a future date. Any other questions?
Quick question here.
Yeah.
Which of these companies offer the solo without an extra supplement?
It's something that I track for my solo travelers. Like the river cruise I did with You by Uniworld was a brand new product from Uniworld. Uniworld created this new product that was meant to appeal to the 21 to 45-year-olds. And the 21 to 45-year-olds went, I'm not going to do river cruising. That's for grandparents. Or they didn't have the money. Either way, the intended demographic didn't jump at this opportunity to sail on these fantastic Uniworld ships that had the $50,000 Savoir beds and those Uniworld product. So Uniworld had these two ships that they took out of their fleet and painted them black and white to appeal to the Instagram crowd, and really tried to make it funky and cool. And the people they intended it for just kind of went, no. So at that, we had a value opportunity. And that's when I took the group of 75 that were mostly solo travelers. And we were able to take that large group without a solo supplement. Otherwise, now, what's happening with You by Uniworld as we go forward is still going to unfold and see what happens to that, because obviously no one could have predicted the situation we're in right now. But otherwise, I track different companies to see who has something special for solo. For example, I've booked some clients on Scenic that might have had a tremendous offer that, there was one time they waived the solo supplement and they gave free air. Well, you can imagine I sold them pretty quickly, and the Scenic withdrew the offer. Generally speaking, there will be different sailings, different times where the river cruise companies are appealing to solos, but the only company except for You by Uniworld that will have at least 1 or 2 cabins, depending on the ship, for solo travelers is AMA. Uniworld, Scenic and Emerald might have 1 cabin each, where it's a solo cabin, but actually waiving the solo supplement versus having a solo cabin is slightly different iteration too. A solo cabin might not be as large as a regular cabin. So a solo cabin will have a different price structure versus a double cabin that they're putting someone in who could accommodate 2 people, and they waive the solo, they're only charging you for 1 person instead of 2. It's more of tracking the market and seeing what's happening. So there's not one company that's perfect for solos. It's more knowing what's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Any other questions? Well, folks, thank you for joining me. I am going to be doing a follow-up. AMA is a company that I really love, and You by Uniworld, obviously I just took a big group of 75. I love that for solo passengers. I've done international expeditions to the Amazon. I've done Viking. I've done a Tauk, both the Main Danube as well as a Tauk bridges for families. So I've experienced the different products. I have ones that I love for different people, and I have favorites. So, you know, AMA is a company that's been very good to me, and I'm going to be doing more with them as well as Uniworld. And I'm going to be inviting them to do some webinars with me where we talk about their products specifically. Maybe doing a group to the Mekong with AMA. The AMA's also just introduced the Nile. Egypt is coming out with AMA. So if that interests you, let me know. And otherwise, I will hit stop recording.